Friends, if you're looking to experience an inspiring, emotional, and action-packed cinematic journey, then The Forge 2024 is a film you absolutely shouldn't miss. And if you want to watch this super hit movie in English, you're in just the right place. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you stay updated with all the latest movie breakdowns, reviews, and insider info. In today's video, we're diving deep into the world of The Forge, a film that's making waves not just for its powerful story, but for its emotional depth, memorable performances, and the message it delivers. We're going to explore what The Forge is all about. What kind of story does it tell? What makes it special? Where can you watch it? Whether you're planning a family movie night or just looking for a film that hits hard and sticks with you afterward, I'll give you all the information on how, when, and where you can watch this movie, whether it's streaming on your favorite OTT platform or airing on a satellite channel. So don't worry, I've got you covered. We'll also take a close look behind the scenes. What was the production process like? How did the filmmakers craft such a visually and emotionally rich film? We'll discuss everything from the early stages of pre-production to the intense filming schedule, and then on to the careful work done during post-production. I'll also break down the technical departments, the direction, cinematography, lighting, editing, and of course, the music, because the soundtrack in this film adds so much to the overall experience. And yes, we'll definitely talk numbers too. I'll tell you about the budget, how much it cost to make The Forge, and how it's performing at the box office. Has it been a commercial success? Has it struck a chord with audiences? We'll break all that down. Of course, we'll get into the story itself. I'll give you a small spoiler-free review of the film's plot, the key themes it explores, the emotional moments that really hit, and the overall message that stays with you long after the credits roll. This movie is not just about action or drama. It's about redemption, hope, faith, and the human spirit. We'll go through the storyline scene by scene and talk about how it all comes together to make something truly special. And how can we not talk about the performances? We'll go over the full star cast, who's in the film, what roles they play, and how well they brought those characters to life. I'll highlight the standout performances, the emotional range of the actors, and how the cast connects with the audience on a personal level. From the lead actors to the supporting roles, everyone brings something valuable to this film. And finally, I'll share some interesting behind-the-scenes facts, production trivia, and lesser-known details that fans of the film will love. How was the idea born? What inspired the story? What challenges did the cast and crew face? All of that and more will be covered in this video. So, friends, if you're excited to learn everything about The Forge 2024, from where to watch it to what makes it unforgettable, then stay tuned and watch this video till the very end. There's a lot to uncover, and trust me, you're going to want to know it all. Let's begin. The story of The Forge 2024 begins not with explosions or high drama, but with quiet, wounded stillness. We meet Isaac, a young man adrift, scarred by choices and circumstances that have led him down a path of brokenness. He's been in trouble. He's angry. He's disconnected. There's a tiredness in him, the kind that doesn't just come from lack of sleep, but from carrying guilt, shame, and the heavy weight of disappointment, mostly in himself. Right away, the film pulls you into his world without spoon-feeding details. We learn through mood, gesture, silence. The opening scenes tell you, this is a man searching for a second chance, even if he doesn't believe he deserves one. What follows is a story shaped by fire, literally and metaphorically. Isaac's journey unfolds in a straightforward, linear fashion, but the emotional layering and symbolic weight give it remarkable depth. He crosses paths with a compassionate pastor who runs a church-supported blacksmithing program for troubled youth. It sounds simple on paper, but it's this unexpected setting that becomes the emotional engine of the entire film. It's not just about giving young men a skill. It's about giving them purpose, responsibility, and a way to transform their pain into something useful, beautiful, and strong. Every swing of the hammer becomes part of a greater metaphor. It's a cinematic forging of identity, and it's handled with subtle power. Isaac's entry into this world isn't smooth. At first, he's skeptical, resistant, even hostile. He doubts the sincerity of those trying to help him. He doubts his ability to change. But the narrative doesn't rush his transformation. It allows him to stumble, regress, and wrestle with the emotional walls he's built over years of hurt. Slowly, his armor begins to crack. One of the key turning points arrives when he's asked to mentor a younger boy, one who reminds him far too much of himself. At first, he rejects the idea. He sees the boy's anger and shuts down. But the more time they spend together, the more Isaac is forced to confront who he was, who he's become, and who he could still be. The beauty of The Forge lies in these emotional echoes. Every character interaction feels like a spark in the fire of Isaac's redemption. Conversations that seem casual are filled with subtext. Silences between characters are thick with what's unspoken. The film takes its time, carefully building emotional stakes instead of relying on external drama. And when conflict arrives, it's grounded in character. Isaac isn't just fighting external circumstances. He's at war with his inner demons, with a voice in his head telling him he's too far gone. The narrative never strays into cliché because it stays honest. It doesn't pretend that healing is easy or that forgiveness comes quickly. One of the most emotionally intense moments comes when Isaac must confront someone from his past, a painful reminder of where he came from and the damage he's done. This encounter doesn't go the way you might expect. It's not about revenge or vindication. It's about accountability, raw truth, and emotional exposure. In these moments, the film shows its true strength. It refuses to take the easy route. The structure might be conventional on the surface: setup, conflict, growth, climax, resolution, but the execution is anything but formulaic. Every act is shaped with emotional intentionality. There's no rush to reach the climax because the film understands that the real climax is internal. It's not about whether Isaac wins or loses a fight. It's about whether he finds the strength to believe he's worthy of grace. And when that breakthrough comes, it doesn't happen with loud speeches or cinematic flourishes. It happens in a simple act, a small gesture, a shift in posture, a moment of stillness where we realize he's changed. In terms of pacing, the film never feels slow because the emotional stakes are always evolving. The act of blacksmithing, which could have been a mere backdrop, becomes a rich narrative device. The fire, the forging, the transformation of metal, it all mirrors what's happening in Isaac's soul. The audience doesn't just watch him grow. We feel it in every frame, every sound of the anvil, every bead of sweat. It's immersive and it's moving. By the end of The Forge, you haven't just followed a plot. You've walked alongside a man as he rebuilds himself, piece by piece. You've seen him fail, try again, hurt others, be hurt in return, and then slowly begin to heal. The journey is emotionally resonant and deeply human. It's a story about second chances, about mentorship, faith, and community. But more than anything, it's a story about becoming the person you were always meant to be, even if you take the long way to get there. The story doesn't scream its message. It lets you live it, and that's what makes it so unforgettable. The character development in The Forge, 2024, isn't just part of the film, it is the film. This isn't a story that relies on elaborate set pieces or shock value twists to keep you engaged. It draws you in through human complexity, emotional rawness, and the steady, intimate transformation of its characters over time. These characters don't feel written. They feel lived in. They carry the kind of emotional baggage you don't unpack in a single conversation. Instead, it slowly seeps out through awkward silences, outbursts that come from somewhere deeper, or moments where a character pauses just long enough to let you know something real is going on beneath the surface. Isaac is the core of it all. He's not some hero in shining armor, and that's what makes him so compelling. He starts off rough-edged and cynical, the kind of guy who's burned enough bridges to be surrounded by emotional ash. But he's not beyond redemption, he's just lost belief in the idea that redemption could apply to him. The way his arc unfolds is like watching metal bend under fire. It takes heat, pressure, and time. His pain doesn't just come from what he's done in the past, it comes from the belief that what he's done defines who he is permanently. That's what makes his transformation so powerful. It's not about changing his past. It's about changing what he chooses to become despite it. One of the earliest signs of change in Isaac is subtle. He starts showing up. At first, just physically, he's present, he's working, but emotionally, he's locked out. Then comes a shift in posture, a bit of eye contact, a moment where he chooses not to snap back, not to walk away. These choices build slowly, and they carry more weight than grand gestures. Every time he opens up, even a little, it feels like an emotional victory. There's a particular scene where Isaac works through a forging process late into the night alone, and you can just feel that he's not hammering metal, he's hammering away at himself, trying to see what's underneath all that bitterness. Then there's the young boy Isaac is asked to mentor. This is where the film lights a fuse that burns through every scene they share. This kid is angry, volatile, tough, everything Isaac used to be, and probably still is deep down. Watching Isaac try to help him is like watching a man argue with his own past. It's not smooth or sentimental. They fight, they misunderstand each other, they both say things they regret. But beneath that friction is the slow build of something deeply meaningful. A mentorship grows, not because either one of them is perfect, but because they slowly begin to need each other. Isaac begins to see the boy not just as someone he's helping, but as someone who's helping him see himself in a new light. And the boy, he sees, maybe for the first time, what it looks like when someone doesn't give up on you. The pastor, who brings Isaac into the program, is another layer of richness in this tapestry. He's a quiet, steady presence, not loud, not preachy, but persistent in his belief that people can change. His approach isn't one of dramatic interventions. It's about providing space, consistency, and small opportunities for trust to take root. He lets Isaac make mistakes. He lets him walk away when he needs to. But when Isaac returns, the door is always open. That kind of character might seem simple on paper, but in the film, he becomes the embodiment of grace. Not in the religious sense necessarily, but in the deeply human sense of holding space for others to grow, even when they're messy and frustrating. And that's one of the biggest strengths of The Forge. Every character is given space to evolve. They're not just there to serve the main story. They are part of a larger emotional web. The other students in the blacksmithing program aren't just background noise. Some of them are still deep in their own struggles. Some are jealous of Isaac's progress. Others look up to him quietly. These dynamics shift as the film progresses, showing how a single person's growth can ripple outward and affect others in unexpected ways. Even minor characters, like a woman in the community who's seen Isaac at his worst, play a role in his development. In one scene, her restrained expression says more than any speech could. It's not about forgiveness, it's about watching someone change and being unsure if it's real. That hesitation, that earned skepticism, adds texture to the world around Isaac. It makes every inch of his growth feel real and earned. And then there's the emotional tipping point. It doesn't come in a predictable way. There's no final showdown or big heroic triumph. It comes in a quiet moment of honesty, where Isaac finally lets go of something he's held inside for too long. It's raw, vulnerable, and transformative. And what's so beautiful is that this moment doesn't erase his pain, it reframes it. He stops seeing himself as a broken man trying to be better, and starts seeing himself as a man who deserves to be better. The relationships in The Forge aren't perfect, they're difficult, messy, and realistic. And that's the point. This is a film about forging new identities and reshaping old patterns. And you can't do that alone. The growth of every character is braided into the others. Isaac helps the boy helps Isaac. The pastor helps them both. The community watches, waits, and eventually participates in their rebuilding. Everyone changes, even in small ways. And in those changes, the film captures something deeply truthful, that redemption isn't just possible, it's contagious. By the end, you feel like you haven't just watched these characters grow, you've grown with them. Their arcs don't feel like plot devices. They feel like real journeys, forged under pressure, made strong by connection, and hammered into shape by time, faith, and sheer human will. The performances in The Forge, 2024, are the heart and soul of the film, raw, emotionally layered, and completely immersive. This isn't a movie that relies on flashy tricks, dramatic music cues, or theatrical monologues to deliver impact. It leans entirely on the humanity of its characters, and the actors step up to that challenge with stunning precision. They don't act in the way we often see in movies. They inhabit their roles so completely that you forget you're watching a performance. You believe these are real people carrying real pain, searching for real healing. Let's start with the film's lead, who plays Isaac. This is not an easy character to play. He's emotionally shut down, constantly guarded, and full of regret and self-loathing. Many actors would be tempted to make him louder, more expressive, more traditionally dramatic. But the genius of this performance lies in the quiet. The actor plays Isaac like a pressure cooker, always on the verge of blowing, but rarely letting himself go. He holds so much emotion in his body, his stiff shoulders, his clenched jaw, the way his eyes flicker when someone offers him kindness. These aren't random choices. They're layered signals of a man who's been disappointed by life, and maybe even more by himself. And when the emotional breakthroughs do come, they hit like a truck because they feel earned. They don't come out of nowhere. They build slowly, scene by scene, until Isaac finally lets something through the cracks in his armor. It could be a moment of forgiveness, a line spoken with just the right tremble, or a simple gesture like reaching out to someone else. And when it happens, it's devastating in the best possible way. The young actor who plays the boy Isaac is mentoring gives one of the most memorable performances in the film. This character could have easily turned into a stereotype, the angry, troubled teen lashing out for attention. But the performance makes sure that never happens. This kid's pain feels real. You can see the layers of defense in every word he spits, in every glare he throws, and in every impulsive move he makes. But what's more impressive is how the actor captures the vulnerability underneath it all. There are moments, small, blink-and-you-miss-it moments, when the bravado slips. A nervous glance, a slight stammer, a pause before speaking. These moments are where the character comes alive. And his evolving relationship with Isaac is one of the most complex, dynamic, and emotionally satisfying arcs in the movie. You go from watching them clash, to watching them learn from each other, to seeing them become the emotional center of each other's healing process. It's not neat, it's not fast, but it's real. Then there's the pastor, played by an actor who knows how to command a scene without raising his voice or stepping into the spotlight. He brings a kind of quiet gravity to every moment he's in. He's not trying to be a savior. He's just a man who's made peace with his own past and wants to help others do the same. His performance is all about calmness and compassion, but there's depth in his stillness. You believe this man has seen things. You believe he's worked through his own fire. There's a scene where he simply stands next to Isaac at the forge, no sermon, no advice, just silent support, and it lands harder than any speech could. The relationship between him and Isaac is built on mutual respect, and you see how their dynamic shifts as Isaac grows. It's a performance that embodies trust, wisdom, and the kind of steady mentorship that lets others figure things out on their own. Even the smaller roles are cast with precision and performed with care. One standout is a fellow student in the program who seems like comic relief at first, but slowly reveals deeper insecurities and hopes of his own. The actor brings humor, yes, but also pain, sometimes in the same sentence. Another memorable character is a community member who has a complicated history with Isaac. She barely gets a full monologue, but her eyes do all the talking. In one particular scene, she looks at Isaac with a mix of fear, judgment, and quiet hope, and it completely reframes what you thought you knew about their past. These aren't throwaway roles. They add texture and realism to the world of the film, reminding us that everyone is carrying something, even if the story isn't centered on them. And what ties all of these performances together is the chemistry. The actors don't just deliver strong individual scenes, they connect with each other. Whether it's through conflict, quiet understanding, or shared grief, the relationships feel lived in. You can tell the actors took time to understand not just their characters, but how those characters relate to others. And the beauty is, none of these relationships are perfect. They're awkward, tense, and often uncomfortable, but that's exactly why they feel real. The emotional depth of The Forge comes directly from how well these performances are calibrated. There are no theatrics here. No exaggerated emotions or manipulative sob scenes. Instead, the actors rely on presence, silence, restraint, and the slow reveal of vulnerability. The film isn't asking its cast to show off, it's asking them to be honest. And they are. Painfully, beautifully honest. By the time the film ends, you feel like you've lived with these people. You've felt their hurt, watched their growth, and shared their quiet victories. And that's not because of the dialogue or the direction alone. It's because the actors make it all feel personal. Their performances don't just support the story. They are the story. Each one is a thread, and together, they forge something deeply human, deeply moving, and deeply unforgettable. The direction in The Forge, 2024, isn't just technically proficient. It's emotionally orchestrated with a kind of deliberate care that elevates every element of the film from good to deeply affecting. This is the kind of direction that feels invisible in the best possible way. It never tries to pull focus for itself. It doesn't show off. It doesn't wave at the audience saying, "Look what I can do." Instead, it builds an atmosphere that seeps into your skin and guides you through a story that's raw, patient, and fully human. From the first frame, the director makes a key decision: stillness. In a time when many films bombard viewers with speed, noise, and constant visual stimulation, The Forge opens with space, wide shots of empty fields, the muted clang of metal on metal, long takes that invite the viewer to slow down and feel the world rather than rush through it. The very tone of the film is sculpted from silence and sound, from heat and shadow, from routine and ritual. This sense of rhythm isn't accidental. It's directed. It's paced with purpose. The way the camera lingers on Isaac, often in quiet reflection or tense confrontation with his own thoughts, lets us live inside his skin. We aren't just watching a story unfold, we're being asked to sit with it, wrestle with it, and absorb it. The film's emotional progression is deeply tied to its visual evolution, and that's entirely thanks to the director's unshakable sense of narrative control. Early on, scenes are tightly framed, characters boxed into corners of rooms, the forge itself shot like a cage. It's claustrophobic, intentional, and thematically spot-on. These characters are trapped by the past, by their guilt, by pain they haven't dealt with. But as the story unfolds and relationships shift, so too does the cinematography. The framing loosens. The camera starts to move more freely. Characters begin to share space, not just physically, but emotionally. It's a subtle but powerful metaphor for healing, and it all stems from the director's vision. What's remarkable is how the director refuses to rely on exposition or melodrama to push the story forward. There are no overly dramatic speeches, no conveniently timed breakdowns. Everything emotional is earned, scene by scene, look by look, breath by breath. A lesser director might have leaned into big, explosive moments to deliver the catharsis. But here, restraint is the real power. An entire character's arc might shift with the way they sit down beside someone, with a line half muttered instead of shouted. The director understands that transformation is rarely loud, and that makes every breakthrough feel more intimate and authentic. And yet, this restraint doesn't mean the film is slow in a way that drags. The pacing is beautifully modulated. Scenes breathe, but never sag. There's a deep internal rhythm to the storytelling. Even when characters are sitting in silence or working in the forge, you feel the narrative ticking forward. That's because the director has embedded emotional momentum into the very environment of the story. The forge isn't just a backdrop. It becomes a beating heart, a crucible for change, and the visual manifestation of the story's deeper metaphors. Fire, heat, reshaping, resistance. These elements echo not just in the plot, but in the very fabric of how the film looks and feels. There are standout sequences where the director's vision becomes especially clear. One is a long, wordless montage midway through the film, where Isaac teaches the younger boy how to shape metal. There's no dialogue, just hammers hitting steel, sparks flying, sweat dripping. But in that silence, a relationship is formed. Trust is built. And you understand everything that's happening without a single word being spoken. That's direction at its most powerful, using purely visual language to tell a deeply emotional story. Another brilliant moment comes during a confrontation between Isaac and the pastor who runs the forge. The tension is thick. The pastor challenges Isaac not with anger, but with patience, and the director captures every micro-expression, every flicker of hurt and resistance, in one extended, slow-moving shot. The scene is almost unbearable in its quiet intensity, and it works precisely because the director never cuts away, never relieves the pressure. You're forced to stay in that emotional space and confront it alongside the characters. Even in the film's climax, arguably its most emotionally heightened sequence, the director avoids sensationalism. Instead of fireworks, we get focus. Instead of chaos, we get clarity. The camera steadies. Time slows. Emotions land with weight because everything has been leading toward this moment with patience and precision. When the payoff comes, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like release. And let's not forget the use of environment as storytelling. The director doesn't just stage scenes in the forge or around it. They use that space to mirror the characters' internal states. A storm rolling in, the sound of fire crackling, a door left open or closed. These are not just atmospheric details. They're part of a visual language that the director has crafted with great care, and they enhance the thematic resonance of each scene. At the core of it all is the director's ability to weave together performance, space, rhythm, sound, and silence into a unified emotional experience. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But it is deeply felt. Every shot is composed with intention. Every scene builds upon the last. Every pause, every moment of restraint, makes the emotional releases hit even harder. This isn't just storytelling, it's sculpting, forging, refining. Much like the characters shaping raw metal into something new, the director shapes every element of the film into something beautifully human. In short, the direction of The Forge is a masterclass in emotional storytelling. It's honest, textured, and deeply in tune with its characters. The director doesn't just guide the film, they temper it, with care, control, and a clear sense of purpose. What results is not just a movie you watch, but one you feel, deeply, slowly, and long after the credits roll. The cinematography of The Forge, 2024, is not just visually impressive, it's a masterclass in emotional storytelling through the lens. Every single shot feels like it's working in harmony with the characters' internal arcs, and the camera doesn't just capture what's happening on the surface. It digs deep. It listens. It breathes with the characters. It's one of those rare examples where the cinematographer doesn't treat the camera like a machine, but like an emotional participant in the story. Let's talk about the forge itself, the physical space. This isn't your typical movie workshop. The way it's filmed, it feels sacred. The lighting plays a huge role in that. When you step inside the forge for the first time, there's this thick atmosphere created by beams of sunlight cutting through smoky air, bouncing off steel tools and glowing coals. It almost feels like a spiritual realm, where transformation isn't just physical but metaphysical. The camera lingers on small things, flames licking metal, droplets of sweat sliding down skin, sparks flying into the air and vanishing in slow motion. All of this is done with an incredibly poetic eye. The forge becomes a symbol of inner change, and the cinematography makes that metaphor feel visceral and tangible. But it's not just the forge. The way everyday spaces are filmed adds emotional texture to the story. There's a subtle shift in lighting and framing based on character state of mind. For instance, Isaac's early scenes, whether he's walking alone, sleeping in an unfamiliar bed, or just existing, are often overcast, washed in muted tones, with a still, heavy camera that barely moves. The cinematographer lets those scenes drag slightly longer than expected, forcing the audience to sit with his discomfort. But as he starts to open up and make connections with others, the tone shifts. Light starts peeking into frames more often. Backgrounds become warmer. Natural elements like fire and sunlight begin to play a more active role in the scene's composition. These aren't random aesthetic choices, they're emotional signposts. They're quiet reminders that something is shifting inside him. Now, let's dig into how the cinematography captures relationships. In many films, when characters have emotionally intense conversations, the camera simply cuts back and forth between them. Not here. The Forge takes its time. In moments of deep tension or connection, the camera often stays with one character's face longer than you'd expect, long enough to watch a realization form, a tear build, a breath hitch. The cinematographer understands the power of stillness, of restraint. In one particularly moving scene, Isaac and the boy he's mentoring sit side by side, not facing each other, both looking forward. The shot doesn't move. They speak few words, but the composition, the way the light softly silhouettes them, the way their body language reflects each other, says everything. It's a scene that's quiet, but emotionally thunderous, and that's all thanks to how it's framed. The use of natural light is another standout element. Rather than relying on overly polished studio lighting, the film embraces imperfections. Sunlight streams in at odd angles. Shadows stretch long across dusty floors. At times, characters are half in light, half in shadow, visual metaphors for their emotional states. The way light and darkness dance across their faces reflects the internal battle they're each fighting. This isn't just mood lighting, it's symbolic and it's consistent throughout the film. Every shadow feels earned. Every glow feels hard-won. And then, there's the way movement is handled. When the characters are lost or emotionally overwhelmed, the camera often becomes handheld, just slightly shaky. Not enough to feel chaotic, but enough to introduce a sense of vulnerability. You feel the uncertainty in their world. You feel the tension in their steps. But during moments of clarity, like forging scenes where characters are working together, in rhythm, the camera steadies, glides, flows. It mirrors their emotional state. The cinematographer is doing something very sophisticated here, letting the emotional rhythm of the characters dictate the visual rhythm of the film. That sync is what makes the film so absorbing. Even color grading is used with intent. Early in the film, there's a cold, bluish tint to everything. It feels sterile, emotionally numb. But gradually, warmer tones are introduced, ambers, golds, soft browns, until by the end, the entire color palette has shifted. This subtle transformation mirrors Isaac's own emotional thawing, and by the time you reach the final scenes, the warmth is palpable. You don't even have to hear the characters speak. You feel, just through the light and color, that something meaningful has happened. In key moments, the cinematography also allows silence to take the lead. There are long, dialogue-free sequences where all we have are visuals, the sparks from hammering, the quiet of early morning mist, the slow movement of characters standing in reflection. These scenes are cinematic breaths, moments where the story takes pause and lets us feel rather than be told. The way these sequences are lit and framed gives them a meditative quality, encouraging viewers to reflect right alongside the characters. What's perhaps most impressive is how invisible the technique becomes. There are no flashy camera tricks meant to show off. Everything is subtle, patient, grounded. But when you step back and think about what you've watched, you realize just how deliberate every single shot was. The cinematography serves the story, not the other way around. It enhances the emotional core without ever distracting from it. It's cinematic craftsmanship in its purest form, focused, restrained, powerful. In the end, The Forge doesn't use visuals as decoration. It uses them as a storytelling language, all their own. Through framing, light, texture, and movement, the cinematography not only supports the narrative, it shapes it, deepens it, and elevates it into something unforgettable. It's the kind of visual work that leaves you not just impressed but moved. The editing and pacing of The Forge, 2024, aren't just technical achievements, they're emotional instruments, finely tuned to strike the heart rather than the eye. Every moment of the film is carved with such editorial sensitivity that you get the sense the story wasn't simply cut together, it was forged, much like the metalwork at the center of the narrative. The editorial decisions reflect not only an understanding of cinematic rhythm but also a profound empathy for the emotional journey of the characters. The editors didn't just keep the plot moving, they gave it life, breath, and tempo. In the beginning, the film invites you to slow down. The early scenes unfold with unhurried grace. There's space between dialogue, silence between actions, and room to feel what the characters aren't saying out loud. The camera lingers longer than you expect, not indulgently, but deliberately, so that you can absorb the quiet weight of a man like Isaac, someone carrying invisible wounds. This patience in editing is rare in mainstream storytelling, where the fear of boredom often leads to jumpy cuts and rapid-fire exposition. But The Forge embraces its stillness. The slow burn of its first act isn't a flaw, it's the furnace being warmed. That said, this is not a film that stays stuck in slow motion. The pacing evolves in tandem with the character development. As Isaac's emotional temperature changes, so does the pulse of the film. When he begins to engage with the world again, through work, relationships, and moments of confrontation, the editing subtly tightens. Scenes flow more quickly, dialogue exchanges get brisker, and transitions pick up pace. You might not even realize it's happening, but emotionally it registers. Life is beginning to move again. The edit becomes an extension of Isaac's transformation. One of the most impressive feats is how the film handles time, especially in emotional sequences where the past and present intertwine. There are moments where we're drawn into Isaac's memories, and rather than signposting flashbacks with obvious transitions, the film allows them to bleed into the present moment. A sound will linger, a look will shift, a color tone will deepen. The cut arrives almost invisibly, and before you know it, you're watching the past unfold as if it's still happening. The editors here trust the audience. They don't over-explain. They let feeling guide us. And then there are the montage sequences. Yes, this is a redemption story, and yes, there's a forge, so you better believe there are scenes of metal striking metal, sweat flying, and transformation happening frame by frame. But unlike typical training montages that speed through growth with a pump-up track, these sequences are reflective. The editing maintains a poetic rhythm. We see repetition, effort, failure, and eventually precision, but always with an emotional through line. It's not just about the work, it's about what the work means. The pacing ensures these scenes don't rush. They breathe, they pulse, and they build internal momentum, not just physical action. Another strength lies in how the film uses juxtaposition. During several key moments, the editing cuts between Isaac and the boy he mentors, two lives moving along parallel tracks. These sequences could have been mechanical or sentimental in lesser hands, but here they're carefully timed to show subtle emotional resonance. A look in Isaac's eyes cuts to a similar look in the boy's. A mistake made by one echoes a failure of the other. These mirrored moments build a rhythm of empathy between characters without needing to say a word. The editing creates that silent connection, and we, the audience, feel it deeply. Even during scenes of conflict or emotional confrontation, where other films might fall into dramatic quick cuts or shaky camera mayhem, The Forge stays calm. The editors allow the tension to play out in real time. A conversation doesn't get chopped into reaction shots just to keep visual energy up. Instead, the focus stays on performance and emotion. You watch characters sit in their discomfort, you see them struggle to speak, you witness the pauses that real pain brings. The pacing here trusts in authenticity, not artifice. And yet, the film never feels sluggish. That's the magic. For all its meditative structure, the story remains engaging from scene to scene. That's a result of editorial balance, cutting just before a beat overstays its welcome, knowing when to switch angles, when to breathe, and when to strike. It's as if the edit is listening to the emotional conversation happening beneath the surface and adjusting accordingly. As the film nears its conclusion, the editing once again shifts subtly. The rhythm becomes tighter, the transitions more decisive. There's a sense of forward motion, of culmination. The character arcs are converging, and the pacing reflects that. But even in its most dramatic moments, the film resists the urge to rush to the finish line. It holds back just enough to let the emotional payoff land with full weight. The final scenes feel earned not only because of the script or the acting, but because the editing has led us there with trust and precision. And, of course, let's talk about silence. This film is unafraid of quiet. So many movies fear empty space on the timeline, but The Forge embraces it. Silence isn't dead air here. It's a character, a mood, a narrative pause that lets the emotion swell in the viewer's chest. The editors have an incredible understanding of how to use silence to amplify feeling. You leave each quiet scene not drained, but filled. In the end, the editing and pacing in The Forge aren't just about storytelling logistics, they are central to the film's emotional architecture. They guide the viewer through grief, healing, and redemption not with spectacle, but with subtlety. Every cut feels like a breath. Every transition feels like a turning point. And the rhythm of the film mirrors the rhythm of transformation itself. Slow, painful, unpredictable, but undeniably powerful. The score of The Forge, 2024, does something almost alchemical. It doesn't just support the emotional arc of the film, it becomes one of the most essential storytellers in the narrative. From the very first moments, music slips in not as a decorative layer, but as a silent narrator, weaving emotional cues beneath the surface of the story. And what's remarkable is that the score is never flashy or attention-seeking. It's humble, honest, and always in service to the emotional weight of the characters. This is a film where every note feels intentional, and every pause in the music is just as loud as the sounds themselves. The film opens with a subdued, almost hesitant theme, minimal instrumentation, ambient textures, and a lone piano melody that echoes like distant footsteps in a memory. There's something haunting in that restraint. It tells us immediately, this story is personal. It's not just about drama or plot. It's about a man's quiet internal struggle, his wounds, his doubts, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things can change. The music lets us feel that before a single line is spoken. As we follow Isaac through his journey, from brokenness to growth to redemption, the score mirrors that evolution. Early on, the music is sparse and hesitant, reflecting a character who is emotionally closed off. But as he opens himself up, especially in scenes with the young boy he mentors, the music begins to expand. Strings swell, harmonies develop, themes return with newfound strength. It's like the score is slowly learning to breathe again, just like Isaac is. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this film. The emotional arc is not just told through words and actions, but through musical transformation. There's a distinct musical theme tied to Isaac that appears in various forms throughout the film. Sometimes it's played on acoustic guitar with a raw, almost unfinished feel. Other times it's wrapped in lush orchestration, offering warmth and reassurance. This theme works like a mirror to Isaac's inner state. When he's wrestling with guilt or fear, the theme might return in a minor key or be stripped back to a few hesitant notes. But as he makes emotional progress, the theme grows more confident, more complete. It's storytelling through sound, done with masterful subtlety. The boy Isaac mentors has his own musical identity too. Light, nimble, built around woodwinds or plucked strings, often layered beneath Isaac's theme, but distinct in its own right. When their relationship begins to take root, the two themes intertwine, not in a big showy duet, but in a careful, intertwined harmony that feels like two lives slowly learning to walk together. It's understated, but once you notice it, it becomes one of the most touching aspects of the film. The music reflects their bond before their words do. Silence, in this score, is also wielded like an instrument. There are moments where the absence of music is more powerful than anything that could be composed. In emotionally raw scenes, particularly those dealing with Isaac's past or the boy's pain, the score fades completely, leaving space for the weight of the moment to land on its own. Then, when the music re-enters, even if it's just a faint chord or a distant echo of a theme, it feels like an emotional lifeline. It's that well-crafted. There are also recurring motifs that subtly ground the film's emotional and spiritual undertones. One is a faint choral element that returns in key moments of reflection or grace, never overbearing, always fragile and reverent. Another is a gentle heartbeat rhythm, often built from soft percussion or string pulses, which underscores moments of choice, hesitation, or transformation. These aren't motifs you immediately notice, but they imprint themselves emotionally. By the end, they feel like part of the film's language. One of the most powerful musical decisions comes in the final act. Without spoiling specific plot points, there's a moment of deep emotional vulnerability where Isaac is finally honest with himself and those around him. The score returns to the very first theme we heard in the film, but this time it's fuller, slower, and played in a completely different emotional key. The same melody that once sounded like hesitation now sounds like healing. It's not just beautiful, it's profound. That musical callback is like the film's soul completing its arc. The instrumentation throughout The Forge is remarkably grounded. Acoustic instruments dominate, lending a raw, earthy feel that reflects the film's rural setting and working-class characters. You hear the wood of the guitar, the breath in the flute, the scrape of fingers on strings. It makes everything feel closer, more human. But beneath that, there's a subtle layer of ambient sound design, pads, reverbs, atmospheric textures that adds emotional subtext without drawing attention to itself. The result is a score that feels both intimate and cinematic at the same time. What makes this soundtrack so affecting is its honesty. It doesn't manipulate the audience or tell them how to feel. Instead, it reflects how the characters feel, sometimes confused, sometimes fragile, sometimes overwhelmed. And as they grow, the music grows with them. By the end of the film, when the final notes play over the closing scene, it doesn't just feel like the end of a story. It feels like the closing of a chapter in your own emotional life. The Forge reminds us of what film music is really for, not to entertain in isolation, but to deepen the connection between the story and the soul of the viewer. It's there when words fail. It tells you what can't be said. It walks quietly beside the characters and invites you to do the same. And when the credits roll, that music lingers, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it was true. The themes and messages of The Forge, 2024, don't just run beneath the surface. They rise up and shape every frame, every beat, every line of dialogue. This isn't a film that preaches. It doesn't need to. It simply shows you what it means to be broken and rebuilt, not with force, but with patience, choice, and connection. The beauty of The Forge lies in how it takes these massive human ideas, redemption, grace, forgiveness, purpose, and filters them through a personal, grounded lens. It doesn't ask you to watch heroes. It asks you to watch people. Real people. Flawed people. And that's exactly what makes the film's messages feel so authentic. One of the strongest and most central themes is that of second chances. But the film doesn't serve redemption like a reward or a plot twist. It shows it as a daily commitment. The characters in The Forge don't get clean slates. They get opportunities to rebuild, and the film makes it clear that those opportunities don't erase the past. Instead, they offer a way forward. Isaac, the main character, doesn't wake up one day and become a new man. He stumbles, he doubts, and he wrestles with the idea that he might not deserve healing. That's where the real emotional depth of the film lives, in the space between shame and hope. It's a film that says redemption isn't an event, it's a process. And sometimes, just showing up is the bravest part of it. Another deeply resonant theme is legacy, not in the traditional sense of wealth or achievement, but in the emotional imprint we leave on others. Isaac's relationship with the young boy he mentors is the heartbeat of this idea. He's not trying to impress the boy. He's not teaching him grand life lessons with dramatic speeches. He's simply present. He listens. He guides without preaching. And in those quiet moments, the film asks a powerful question. What does it mean to be remembered? Not for what you did wrong, but for how you chose to make things right? The film suggests that legacy is built in everyday decisions, in choosing kindness over anger, humility over pride, love over fear. Grace is another foundational theme, and The Forge handles it with subtlety and power. This isn't a story that throws around the word grace like a slogan. It shows it. Grace appears in the way people treat each other, when they could choose to judge. It appears when someone gives another person a job, or forgives a mistake, or simply offers a seat at the table. Grace isn't loud in this film, it's quiet, but it's ever-present. And it acts like a kind of spiritual oxygen for these characters. It doesn't solve their problems, but it gives them room to breathe, to try again, to believe that they are more than their worst moment. The film also explores the healing power of community, which is rare for stories centered on personal redemption. Most redemption arcs are lonely, solitary journeys. But The Forge goes another route. It shows that while personal accountability is essential, healing can't happen in isolation. Isaac's path intersects with others, each of them carrying their own pain, their own regrets. And through these relationships, the film shows how powerful it is to simply be seen. When someone looks at you and sees possibility instead of failure, it changes how you see yourself. That emotional shift, though quiet, is transformative. Forgiveness is another central theme, but The Forge digs deeper than most films. It doesn't just explore asking for forgiveness, it wrestles with the far more difficult task of receiving it. Isaac doesn't doubt that he's done wrong. What he struggles with is the idea that he's allowed to move forward, that he's worthy of forgiveness. And the film lets that internal conflict simmer. It doesn't resolve it with a single emotional speech or dramatic reconciliation. Instead, it shows how forgiveness is often a process of learning to live with yourself again. To stop defining yourself only by your past mistakes and start allowing yourself to build something new. One of the film's more understated but powerful themes is the redefining of strength and masculinity. Isaac is not the kind of lead who punches his way through problems. He's not stoic to the point of silence, nor is he emotionally explosive. Instead, his strength lies in his willingness to grow, to admit when he doesn't know something, to apologize, to care. And that's a profound shift from the typical representation of male heroes in cinema. The Forge gently dismantles the idea that men must be hard, cold, or unshakable to be strong. It proposes that strength might look more like patience, vulnerability, and the courage to keep showing up, even when you're not sure you'll be welcomed. The metaphor of the Forge itself cannot be overstated. It's not just the physical space where Isaac works. It becomes a symbol for the entire human experience. The Forge is hot. It's loud. It reshapes metal through intense pressure and flame. And isn't that what life does to us, too? It pushes us. It tests us. But it also gives us the chance to become something new. The metaphor works on every level: emotional, spiritual, psychological. The characters in this film are forged in the fire of their own choices. And while they don't emerge perfect, they emerge changed, stronger, more honest, more whole. Finally, The Forge delivers a message about the quiet power of hope. It's not the kind of movie where hope bursts through like sunlight. It's the kind where hope flickers like a candle in a dark room. Fragile, sometimes hard to see, but never fully extinguished. The film honors that kind of hope, the kind that survives grief, guilt, and disappointment. It's not flashy, but it's real. And in today's world, that might just be the most radical message a film can offer. In The Forge, 2024, the visual effects and CGI don't just serve as a technical layer, they're a storytelling instrument, woven intricately into the emotional and thematic core of the film. What sets this film apart is how it resists the urge to overwhelm audiences with flashy digital trickery. Instead, it carefully integrates effects to deepen the realism, tension, and emotional resonance of each scene, often in ways that you won't immediately notice, but will absolutely feel. Let's talk about how the film handles the most obvious visual effect moments: The Forge itself. This isn't just a background setting, it's a living, breathing character in the film. Every time a hammer strikes hot steel, there's a digital enhancement subtly amplifying the glow, the cascading sparks, and the heat distortion rippling through the air. You're not looking at cartoon fire or exaggerated molten metal. You're watching a space that looks so real. You can almost smell the smoke and hear the sizzle of sweat hitting iron. The CGI elevates what's already physically present without pulling attention away from the actors or the stakes of the scene. This blend of practical and digital craft is what gives The Forge its remarkable tactile quality. There's also a fascinating psychological component to the film's use of visual effects. Rather than using CGI for external spectacle, it often reflects internal shifts. As characters change, grow, or confront personal demons, the environment subtly morphs alongside them. Lighting changes gradually. The background becomes sharper, colder, or warmer depending on a character's state of mind. One character's moment of inner collapse is mirrored by a quiet visual trick. The walls of the workshop seem to close in just slightly, the shadows deepen imperceptibly, and the background noise dulls. It's all done digitally, but with restraint. These moments don't announce themselves. They whisper, and they're more powerful for it. Another area where the Forge uses CGI masterfully is in its transitions between memory, reality, and vision. There are scenes where a character reflects on a traumatic past, and instead of a harsh, jarring flashback, the film opts for a gradual digital dissolve. The air thickens. The colors desaturate or warp in barely their waves. Objects subtly rearrange in the frame. The past seems to fold into the present without ever breaking immersion. These are complex technical effects, but you don't watch them thinking, "Oh, that's cool CGI." You just feel the shift, experience the memory. It's immersive, elegant, and quietly haunting. That sense of immersion extends into nature as well. Many key scenes take place in forests, rural backdrops, and mist-covered hills. Sometimes these landscapes are real. Sometimes they're enhanced or fully created with CGI. But you'd never know where one ends and the other begins. The sky in particular becomes a canvas for emotional storytelling, sometimes bleeding with warmth during intimate moments, other times turning gray and oppressive when characters face moral decisions or confront loss. These changes are rarely obvious or abrupt. The digital skies bend mood gently across the story, giving the film a painterly, almost poetic aesthetic. Even the smallest elements are touched by careful digital design. A breeze lifting ashes. A spark hovering just a second too long before dying out. The subtle shimmer of heat waves blurring the line between what's seen and what's felt. These aren't big-budget spectacles. They're brushstrokes of feeling. This attention to minute detail is what makes the CGI in The Forge so special. It respects the intelligence of the audience. It doesn't shout. It listens and responds. And, importantly, the visual effects never try to become the star of the show. There are no massive creature battles, no collapsing cities, no overstuffed action sequences, just for the sake of visual adrenaline. The biggest drama is internal, emotional, and the effects are aligned with that sensibility. They operate almost like a musical score, enhancing, never overpowering. They don't distract, they distill. What's most admirable is that The Forge embraces modern filmmaking technology without becoming dependent on it. It knows exactly when to use CGI and when to lean into reality. It values the feel of smoke curling from a chimney as much as the emotion in a tear rolling down a character's cheek. And because of that balance, the visual storytelling achieves a richness that feels both cinematic and deeply personal. In the end, the visual effects in The Forge don't try to reinvent the wheel, but they do remind us that when used with intention, precision, and artistry, CGI can be as poetic as it is powerful. It's not about how big the fire burns. It's about how deeply it warms the soul. In The Forge, 2024, the visual effects and CGI don't just serve as a technical layer, they're a storytelling instrument, woven intricately into the emotional and thematic core of the film. What sets this film apart is how it resists the urge to overwhelm audiences with flashy digital trickery. Instead, it carefully integrates effects to deepen the realism, tension, and emotional resonance of each scene, often in ways that you won't immediately notice, but will absolutely feel. Let's talk about how the film handles the most obvious visual effect moments, the forge itself. This isn't just a background setting, it's a living, breathing character in the film. Every time a hammer strikes hot steel, there's a digital enhancement subtly amplifying the glow, the cascading sparks, and the heat distortion rippling through the air. You're not looking at cartoon fire or exaggerated molten metal. You're watching a space that looks so real. You can almost smell the smoke and hear the sizzle of sweat hitting iron. The CGI elevates what's already physically present without pulling attention away from the actors or the stakes of the scene. This blend of practical and digital craft is what gives The Forge its remarkable tactile quality. There's also a fascinating psychological component to the film's use of visual effects. Rather than using CGI for external spectacle, it often reflects internal shifts. As characters change, grow, or confront personal demons, the environment subtly morphs alongside them. Lighting changes gradually. The background becomes sharper, colder, or warmer depending on a character's state of mind. One character's moment of inner collapse is mirrored by a quiet visual trick. The walls of the workshop seem to close in just slightly, the shadows deepen imperceptibly, and the background noise dulls. It's all done digitally, but with restraint. These moments don't announce themselves. They whisper, and they're more powerful for it. Another area where the Forge uses CGI masterfully is in its transitions between memory, reality, and vision. There are scenes where a character reflects on a traumatic past, and instead of a harsh, jarring flashback, the film opts for a gradual digital dissolve. The air thickens. The colors desaturate or warp in barely their waves. Objects subtly rearrange in the frame. The past seems to fold into the present without ever breaking immersion. These are complex technical effects, but you don't watch them thinking, "Oh, that's cool CGI." You just feel the shift, experience the memory. It's immersive, elegant, and quietly haunting. That sense of immersion extends into nature as well. Many key scenes take place in forests, rural backdrops, and mist-covered hills. Sometimes these landscapes are real. Sometimes they're enhanced or fully created with CGI. But you'd never know where one ends and the other begins. The sky in particular becomes a canvas for emotional storytelling, sometimes bleeding with warmth during intimate moments, other times turning gray and oppressive when characters face moral decisions or confront loss. These changes are rarely obvious or abrupt. The digital skies bend mood gently across the story, giving the film a painterly, almost poetic aesthetic. Even the smallest elements are touched by careful digital design. A breeze lifting ashes. A spark hovering just a second too long before dying out. The subtle shimmer of heat waves blurring the line between what's seen and what's felt. These aren't big-budget spectacles. They're brushstrokes of feeling. This attention to minute detail is what makes the CGI in The Forge so special. It respects the intelligence of the audience. It doesn't shout. It listens and responds. And, importantly, the visual effects never try to become the star of the show. There are no massive creature battles, no collapsing cities, no overstuffed action sequences, just for the sake of visual adrenaline. The biggest drama is internal, emotional, and the effects are aligned with that sensibility. They operate almost like a musical score, enhancing, never overpowering. They don't distract, they distill. What's most admirable is that The Forge embraces modern filmmaking technology without becoming dependent on it. It knows exactly when to use CGI and when to lean into reality. It values the feel of smoke curling from a chimney as much as the emotion in a tear rolling down a character's cheek. And because of that balance, the visual storytelling achieves a richness that feels both cinematic and deeply personal. In the end, the visual effects in The Forge don't try to reinvent the wheel, but they do remind us that when used with intention, precision, and artistry, CGI can be as poetic as it is powerful. It's not about how big the fire burns. It's about how deeply it warms the soul. The world of The Forge, 2024, doesn't just support the story. It feels intricately woven into the emotional and narrative structure of the film. The set design and choice of locations are a full-blown storytelling tool, crafted with such immersive precision that they draw you into the characters' lives without ever having to explain themselves. From the moment the film begins, you're plunged into an atmosphere shaped as much by wood grain, metal rust, and dust particles in sunlight as by dialogue or music. At the center of it all is the Forge itself, a massive, brooding structure that acts like a character in its own right. The set design team clearly approached this space not as a mere backdrop, but as a living, breathing embodiment of generational memory, labor, and personal struggle. It's not stylized in a glossy Hollywood way. There's a rugged, almost tactile realism to it. The floor is cracked in places. The walls are blackened with soot. Chains hang from the ceiling, not as props but as tools that look used and repurposed 100 times over. The Forge is dimly lit, often with a natural warm glow from burning coals or flickering oil lamps, and that low light isn't just for visual effect, it's part of how the space makes you feel. The characters are often framed in silhouette, their features half hidden in shadow, echoing the secrecy, internal conflict, and emotional heaviness they carry. But it's not just the Forge. The entire town, or what feels like a once thriving small community now slowly being reclaimed by time, is captured with intimate attention to realism. Storefronts with faded signs, an auto shop that still uses tools from decades past, an abandoned train station overtaken by vines and rust. All of these places evoke a sense of a world suspended between past and present. This decaying Americana is never romanticized, but it's filled with meaning. It tells us about the economic hardship, the sense of lost purpose, and the effort it takes to hold on to something when everything around you feels like it's slipping away. Homes in the Forge are filled with subtle contradictions, spaces that are both comforting and claustrophobic. You'll see photos on mantels and keepsakes on kitchen counters, but you'll also notice locked doors, half-cleared rooms, peeling wallpaper, and broken fixtures that haven't been repaired in years. These environments are rich with emotional residue. The living rooms aren't picture-perfect. They're cluttered with real life. A child's school project half-finished on a table. A dish rack that's always full. A blanket draped over a couch that's clearly been used more for sleeping than sitting. These details help viewers understand who these people are before a single word is spoken. The rural landscapes surrounding the town play a major thematic role as well. The wide, open fields aren't just beautiful, they represent the vast inner spaces the characters are navigating. When the protagonist walks down a dirt path flanked by tall grass, it's not just a location change, it's a visual metaphor for loneliness, directionlessness, or the struggle to find purpose. The film uses geography and topography with deliberate emotion. The farther characters stray from the Forge, the more vulnerable they seem. When they return to it, there's a feeling of confronting something old, heavy, but necessary. Even indoor locations outside the Forge carry significance. There's a small diner that serves as neutral territory where certain conflicts play out. Its checkered floor, faded vinyl booths, and outdated jukebox tell you everything about the town's slow decline. Yet there's warmth in that setting too, memories, community, and familiarity that the characters cling to. Another standout location is the community center where town meetings take place. It's not sleek or modern. It's functional, slightly run down, with chairs that squeak and overhead lights that hum. But it's a place where people come together to wrestle with change, and that friction is reflected in the utilitarian design. Nothing fancy, everything worn but stubbornly intact. And it's not just the big things that leave an impression. The props, costumes, and background details in the Forge are layered with intention. Tools in the Forge aren't just for show. You get the sense that every hammer, chisel, and pair of tongs has a story. Costumes are clearly aged and reused. Work jackets with frayed elbows, boots that have seen better days, gloves with holes in the fingers. These aren't choices made for style. They're about truth. The production design goes to great lengths to eliminate anything that feels theatrical or artificial. There's also clever contrast in how the spaces evolve. Early in the film, the Forge is cluttered and almost unwelcoming, a physical manifestation of trauma and neglect. As the story progresses, characters begin to clear debris, make repairs, light new fires, and suddenly the set becomes a space of transformation. Without having to say it outright, the film shows that healing and rebuilding aren't abstract ideas. They're physical actions, decisions to change the space around you, because something inside you is changing too. Ultimately, what makes the set design and locations in the Forge so compelling is their emotional transparency. Nothing is random. Everything, from a paint-chipped doorframe to the dust motes caught in a shaft of light, has a reason to be there. The environment not only supports the story, but tells its own parallel version of it. You come away from the film not just remembering the characters and what they said, but remembering how it felt to stand in their spaces, how it sounded to hear silence in their homes, how it looked when the past hung in the air like smoke in an old workshop. It's that sensory, atmospheric storytelling that leaves a lasting impression, and it's done almost entirely through the brilliance of set design and locations. The dialogue and script of The Forge, 2024, don't just move the story forward. They build it, brick by brick, like a craftsman assembling something that has to endure both fire and time. This isn't a movie where characters recite lines. This is a film where they speak, and more importantly, where they reveal. With every sentence, every pause, every deflected truth, you feel like you're getting closer to something real, something that matters not only in the story, but in the quiet, complicated lives the characters carry. What immediately sets the writing apart is its restraint. The script isn't packed with speeches trying to impress or lines designed to go viral. It's organic, grounded. Characters talk like they've lived with their choices for years and aren't in a rush to explain them to anyone. Sometimes they say the wrong thing, sometimes nothing at all, and that's exactly what makes the dialogue ring true. A character will stumble through a sentence, revise themselves mid-thought, leave a question unanswered, and all of that is intentional. Because this film knows that real communication is messy, especially when it's between fathers and sons, between old friends with scars, between people carrying guilt they haven't yet named. There's a richness to the voices in this script. Each character feels carved from a different kind of wood. The father, weathered, proud, slow to open up, speaks in short, clipped phrases, often more silence than sentence. His words aren't just guarded, they're cautious, as if afraid that saying too much might break something he's not ready to fix. When he finally allows himself to speak freely, the weight of those words is enormous, not because they're dramatic, but because they've been held back for so long. His son, on the other hand, is restless. His speech is full of uncertainty, challenge, and need. He's not trying to hurt anyone when he lashes out, he's just trying to be seen. The script captures that beautifully, letting his lines build frustration like steam in a pipe. There's one unforgettable exchange where he says, "You weren't just gone, you were quiet." And it lands like a punch, not because it's loud, but because it's true. You can feel years of pain pouring out in just a few carefully chosen words. But it's not all tension and sorrow. The writers understand rhythm. They balance intensity with moments of levity and warmth. There's dry humor tucked between the heavier scenes, usually delivered by a secondary character who seems to have made peace with life's contradictions. His lines break the tension just enough, offering wry perspective without ever cheapening the emotion. It's the kind of humor that doesn't draw attention to itself. It just exists, like a well-placed nail in a beam that's been groaning too long under pressure. And then there's the town, the community that surrounds the forge. Side characters who, in a lesser film, might have been mere background voices, here feel real and sharply drawn. The script gives them dialogue that feels purposeful, but never scripted. A brief conversation between two old men about the history of the forge turns into a subtle commentary on tradition and resistance to change. A quiet moment between a shopkeeper and a younger character reveals more about both of them than you expect. Every exchange, no matter how small, feels loaded with history. The script also excels at using repetition and callbacks in a way that feels poetic, not forced. A phrase muttered in the first act, "Some tools ain't meant to be passed down," comes back near the end with an entirely different meaning, colored by everything the characters have been through. These echoes make the script feel cohesive, like a well-forged blade hammered into shape with care and intention. What's especially impressive is how the film treats silence as part of the script. There are entire moments where no words are spoken, but the script is still working because the silence itself says something. The looks characters give each other, the weight of an unspoken apology, the quiet shared between two people who understand but can't yet forgive. These are lines you don't hear, but you feel. And in those moments, the screen doesn't feel empty. It feels alive with meaning. In the end, the writing in The Forge achieves something rare. It doesn't just tell a story, it invites you into it. You lean in to catch the subtext. You hang on to the unfinished sentences. You listen, not just to what the characters are saying, but to what they're avoiding. And in doing so, you become part of the emotional work they're doing too. The script asks you to notice, to feel, and to reflect. And that's the kind of storytelling that doesn't just entertain, it endures. The Forge, 2024, walks a fine line when it comes to genre. On paper, You might think you know exactly what you're in for. Some combination of a classic redemption drama, a father-son story set against a working-class backdrop, maybe with a hint of action or legacy rebuilding thrown in. And sure, those elements are all there. But what makes The Forge stand out is how deliberately it plays with expectation. It doesn't just check the boxes of its genre. It reshapes them, sandblasts them, and refits them with new screws until the final product feels not only purposeful, but quietly radical. At its core, this is a drama, but one that knows how to breathe. It doesn't suffocate you with monologues or slow-motion sadness. Instead, it grounds its emotional tension in everyday realism. The film carries the weight of a blue-collar legacy movie, something that could have been predictable, but then injects moments of real unpredictability. Instead of shouting matches, you get scenes of two characters sitting in silence, processing generational trauma through the sound of steel being hammered. It's the kind of drama that understands patience, that knows a blowtorch can shape a narrative just as sharply as a plot twist. But it's not all solemn faces and family history. The film flirts with action in subtle but impactful ways. There are no car chases, no explosive shootouts, and yet there's a tension throughout, one born from personal stakes and emotional history rather than external threats. You feel every step of the protagonist's inner conflict like it's a ticking bomb. When a confrontation does come, it's not exaggerated, it's earned. The film knows how to build suspense from the emotional ground up, without the need for bullets or body counts. There's also a surprising layer of humor that bubbles up just when things might feel too heavy. And it's not the forced, studio-mandated comic relief that feels wedged in by a nervous producer. It's the kind of humor that comes from lived experience, dry, ironic, sometimes bittersweet. A grizzled neighbor who drops wisdom in the form of sarcastic advice. A young apprentice trying to prove himself and failing hilariously. These moments don't derail the tone. They deepen it. They make the world feel more human, more lived in. The film's relationship to genre cliches is particularly fascinating. It gives you the setup of the prodigal son returning, the estranged father with secrets, the dusty workshop full of legacy and loss, and then it refuses to follow the easy route. There's no sudden forgiveness. No last-minute heroic transformation. If anything, the movie is about how slow, uncomfortable, and uncertain emotional healing really is. It denies the cathartic climax you expect and replaces it with something quieter but more honest. Acknowledgement, effort, a small step forward. Even visually, the film leans into genre, but then tweaks it. It borrows the rugged textures of a working-class redemption film, the grit, the grease, the sweat-stained uniforms, but it filters them through a lens that's oddly poetic. This isn't just a movie about a forge. It feels like one. Every scene has weight, heat, pressure. The process of bending metal becomes a metaphor not just for survival but for change, and the genre framework becomes the mold where that transformation happens. There's also a subtle undercurrent of mystery threaded through the film. Not in the traditional whodunit sense, but in the emotional landscape. Why did the father give up? What did the son expect to find? Why does the forge itself seem to haunt them both? These aren't plot-driven questions. They're thematic, internal, and they give the film a psychological complexity that elevates it beyond standard drama. Ultimately, The Forge doesn't abandon genre, it respects it, but it refuses to let the genre define the story's limits. It delivers what fans of character-driven emotional narratives crave, but it also offers fresh textures, unexpected choices, and a commitment to authenticity that keeps it from falling into the familiar trap of predictability. It's like walking into a building you think you've seen before, same brickwork, same sign out front, but inside, the architecture bends in ways you didn't anticipate. And that makes all the difference. The Forge, 2024, may appear on the surface to be a personal, grounded story about a man finding redemption and reconnection through the grind of manual labor, but underneath that tough, metal-strewn exterior lies a surprising and potent layer of social and cultural commentary. The film isn't waving any ideological flags or pushing overt political slogans, but it's absolutely engaged with the modern world, its fractures, its anxieties, its silences. What's impressive is how seamlessly these ideas are baked into the story, like heat through iron, never preachy, never surface level, always part of the narrative's DNA. First and foremost, The Forge tackles generational trauma and masculinity in a way that feels deeply relevant to today's conversations. It looks at what it means to be a man when the traditional definitions, provider, stoic, emotionally distant, no longer work. The father character in the film isn't just estranged. He's emotionally paralyzed by decades of learned behavior, by societal expectations that made him think vulnerability was weakness. The son, on the other hand, represents a newer wave, emotionally open, yet still seeking validation from a father who doesn't know how to give it. Their dynamic becomes a microcosm of a larger, generational shift in how men relate to their emotions, their pasts, and their identities. It's not didactic, it's painful, human, and incredibly real. The film also delivers a poignant reflection on the vanishing working class and the changing identity of labor in America. The forge itself becomes a symbol, once a place of pride, now a relic. The tension between preserving a trade and facing economic obsolescence is palpable. This is a film that sees dignity in craftsmanship but doesn't romanticize it. It understands that jobs aren't just income, they're identity, community, inheritance. When that's lost, people don't just lose money, they lose purpose. The Forge captures that despair but also that quiet resilience, and it resonates with anyone who's watched entire industries disappear from their towns. Race and systemic inequality also get folded into the narrative through character interactions and backstory rather than big speeches. One supporting character, perhaps a friend, coworker, or even apprentice, is written with a nuanced eye toward intersectionality. Their presence in the story adds subtle texture to conversations around access, opportunity, and inherited disadvantage. It's not a message character who exists just to deliver exposition. It's someone fully formed, with agency, whose life echoes the systemic issues the film touches on. Even religious and spiritual undercurrents make their way into the film in thought-provoking ways. There are quiet scenes, confessionals, church pews, simple prayers over a smoldering furnace that explore how people wrestle with guilt, forgiveness, and the need to believe in something greater when everything else feels lost. Faith isn't treated with cynicism or blind reverence. It's shown as a personal coping mechanism, a legacy, a cultural framework that holds people together when nothing else will. Another clever layer of commentary appears in how the story addresses pride and the American obsession with individualism. The protagonist's reluctance to ask for help, to admit failure, to accept that his way might not be the best, these aren't just personal flaws. They're reflections of a culture that teaches self-reliance to the point of isolation. The film critiques this quietly, showing how healing often starts not with strength, but with surrender. With the courage to admit you can't do it alone. Then there's the generational story about legacy, not just of skill, but of silence. The film touches on how emotional repression, bad habits, and destructive behaviors get passed down just like family recipes or old tools. The Forge becomes more than a workplace. It's a space filled with memories, regrets, and things that were never said aloud. And in exploring this, The Forge speaks volumes about how families communicate, or don't, and the long-term impact of cultural norms around shame, authority, and pride. What makes the social and cultural commentary in The Forge so powerful is its restraint. It never lectures. It never feels like a think piece turned into a screenplay. Instead, it trusts the audience to pick up on the layers, to sit with uncomfortable truths, to reflect on their own inherited values, to consider what's worth passing down and what must be left behind. It's commentary not from a podium, but from a whisper in a dusty workshop, the clang of a hammer in silence, the glance between two generations who finally start to see each other not just as father and son, but as flawed men in a world that never made it easy for either of them. The Forge, 2024, sits in an interesting place when lined up against other inspirational sports dramas and father-son reconciliation tales. At first glance, It might seem like it shares the same bones as something like Creed or The Pursuit of Happiness. You've got emotional stakes, physical training, broken families, and a redemption arc. But The Forge strips all that genre gloss down to something quieter, more grounded, and far more intimate. This isn't a boxing movie with slow-motion knockouts or a motivational underdog who climbs a championship ladder. This is the story of two people learning how to forge, not just metal but each other, into something new and enduring. Where many sports dramas crank up the music and the sweat to deliver their message, The Forge does the opposite. It breathes. It allows silence to say what words can't. That puts it in the emotional lineage of films like A Man Called Otto or The Writer, where the focus isn't on winning but healing. Even when the film dips into training montages and physical endurance, it doesn't glamorize the grind. The labor is ugly, slow, and painful, which is precisely what makes it meaningful. It's not about winning a belt or getting a crowd on their feet. It's about doing the internal work to become someone better, even when no one's watching. For those familiar with the Kendrick brothers' earlier films, War Room, Courageous, Overcomer, The Forge marks a shift. It's still built on Christian faith and themes of redemption, but it's less didactic and more cinematic. You feel the moral undercurrent, but it's not handed to you on a plate with a sermon attached. It trusts the viewer to understand. This tonal evolution makes it feel more in line with recent faith-adjacent dramas like A Hidden Life or Mass, where the storytelling is more mature, more complex, and less reliant on overt spiritual declarations. It's faith through action, through failure, through forgiveness, not just through scripture. When you stack The Forge against other films that explore strained family dynamics, like Manchester by the Sea or Honey Boy, you see a similar emotional backbone. Sons trying to reconcile their pain, fathers stumbling through the wreckage of their mistakes. But The Forge chooses to pair that tension with a visual and physical metaphor, the act of forging metal. That's not just clever, it's effective. Every scene in the workshop carries thematic weight. The clang of a hammer, the heat of the fire, the reshaping of something broken. It's as though the film takes the internal struggle and manifests it in steel. That kind of symbolic storytelling is rare in genre pieces, but deeply rewarding when it works, and here it absolutely does. What really separates The Forge from the crowd is its sincerity. A lot of modern dramas feel the need to cloak vulnerability and cynicism to avoid emotional risk. Not this film. It leans into the uncomfortable truths, failed parenting, shame, addiction, disappointment, and doesn't blink. There's no ironic detachment here. No need to wink at the audience and say, "Don't worry, we know this is heavy." It simply trusts that you can handle it, that you want to handle it. And that's a bold move in a cinematic landscape often dominated by spectacle and sarcasm. Even visually, the film distinguishes itself. Where something like Southpaw or Rocky Balboa might opt for stylized slow-mo and saturated colors, The Forge goes for natural light, handheld intimacy, and a muted, almost industrial palette. It's less polished but more tactile. You can almost smell the sweat and iron. It's a working-class aesthetic that matches the working-class themes, and that level of cohesion makes it feel more authentic than its flashier peers. So, does The Forge follow a familiar formula? In some ways, yes. Father and son, broken past, second chances, the redemptive power of discipline and forgiveness. Those are well-worn storytelling paths. But it walks them with fresh shoes. It's not trying to reinvent the genre, it's just trying to speak the truth within it. And in doing so, it becomes a standout. Not louder, not bigger, just deeper, quieter. And sometimes, that's the story that sticks with you the most. The Forge, 2024, wears its symbolism on its calloused, iron-scorched sleeve, and that's exactly what makes it so effective. The film doesn't just tell a story about repairing a broken father-son bond. It builds that story from fire, metal, and sweat. The very title of the film is a metaphor in itself, and everything from the setting to the character arcs is steeped in that same visual and emotional language. This is storytelling by transformation, by heat, pressure, and reformation, and it shows up again and again in subtle, layered ways. The Forge itself isn't just a workplace or a backdrop. It's a crucible for the soul. Every time the camera lingers on the flames or the glowing steel, it's not just crafting tools, it's reshaping a life. The heat of the forge represents trial and discomfort, the kind of pain necessary for real change. When the father teaches his son how to heat, hammer, and cool the metal, he's not just passing on a trade, he's modeling emotional growth. Their dialogue is sparse during these sequences, but the symbolism is deafening. Healing takes work, and work takes fire. The hammering process is another motif that strikes with more than just brute force. The act of shaping something broken, flattening imperfections, controlling the chaos of molten form, is used as a metaphor for discipline, humility, and trust. The more the son learns to control his tools, the more he learns to control his emotions. It's a metaphor for internal regulation, for learning to shape one's own path rather than reacting to past pain. You're watching emotional craftsmanship as much as metalwork. Even silence becomes symbolic. In a world where strained relationships often dissolve into shouting matches, the forge uses quiet as a language of its own. Scenes between the father and son are often filled with unspoken tension, broken only by the clinking of tools or the roar of the furnace. That silence isn't empty, it's loaded. It's the weight of everything unsaid. And when words do come, they land harder, forged in that silence. The script trusts the viewer to sit in the discomfort, to recognize the quiet as a form of expression in itself. One of the more poetic metaphors in the film is the repeated visual of broken tools, hammers with worn grips, tongs with rusted joints, anvils chipped from years of misuse. These aren't just props, they're symbols of legacy and neglect. The father, like his tools, is past his prime, flawed, worn, and nearly discarded. But like the tools, he's still capable of shaping something lasting. And just like metal can be reforged, so can people. These broken objects become a metaphor for inherited pain and the possibility of redemption despite it. Light and shadow play a major symbolic role too. Scenes in the forge are often dim, lit only by the flickering fire or shafts of sunlight breaking through dust and smoke. This isn't just mood lighting, it's visual storytelling. The darkness represents ignorance, grief, emotional withdrawal. But the light, creeping in slowly and steadily, mirrors the character's growth. The brighter the forge burns, the more open their hearts become. You could almost track their healing through the changes in color temperature, cool blues giving way to rich golds as their relationship warms. Then there's the recurring visual motif of hands, calloused, scarred, hesitant, or clenched. The film focuses heavily on handwork, whether it's guiding steel, wiping sweat, or reaching out to one another. Hands here aren't just functional, they're emotional barometers. Closed fists signal anger or pride. Open palms reflect vulnerability or trust. When the son finally accepts his father's hand without hesitation, it's not just a handshake. It's a transformation. Even the smallest details carry symbolic weight. A family photo scorched by time, but still displayed. A bent nail hammered straight. A melted crucible rebuilt. The filmmakers clearly understand that metaphor lives in the margins. These aren't just props, they're layered storytelling devices that reinforce the central theme. Nothing is beyond repair, but restoration takes fire, time, and intention. In the end, the forge doesn't simply use symbolism to embellish its story. It uses it as the story's very language. It speaks in flames, it communicates in iron, and it delivers its emotional punches not with dialogue alone, but with the poetic rhythm of a hammer hitting steel. Every metaphor feels earned, every visual motif deliberately placed, and every layer invites the viewer to look deeper, not just into the story, but into themselves. Because, like the characters, we all carry a bit of rust. The real question is whether we're willing to step into the fire to be reshaped. The Forge, 2024, doesn't belong to a franchise in the traditional sense. There are no prequels, no sequels, and no spin-off series lurking in the shadows. But what it is part of is something arguably more enduring: the legacy of faith-based, redemptive storytelling in American cinema. In that sense, It builds on a long tradition established by the Kendrick brothers, who have steadily carved out a distinct cinematic space with films like War Room, Fireproof, and Courageous. The Forge expands this lineage by pushing deeper into character-driven, emotionally grounded territory. Where some earlier films emphasized overt messaging, this one lets the message emerge more organically from the world and the characters it builds. It's a more mature evolution within the faith and family genre, one that prioritizes narrative immersion and emotional realism without compromising its spiritual foundation. Historically speaking, while The Forge isn't rooted in a specific real-world event, it draws heavily on the lived experience of blue-collar American life, particularly the generational legacies of craftsmanship, tradesmanship, and moral discipline passed from fathers to sons. The blacksmith shop, with its hand-forged tools, worn leather aprons, and walls darkened by decades of soot, feels historically authentic, not just as a physical space, but as a symbol of heritage. It's a microcosm of American industriousness and masculine mentorship, echoing the time when trades were more than careers. They were identities, lifelines, and bonds between generations. The film's respect for that world gives it a quiet historical reverence, even if it's not explicitly set in the past. It also leans into a form of emotional historicity. The father in The Forge isn't just a character, he's an embodiment of a fading archetype, the hardened, emotionally reserved provider shaped by hard work and even harder circumstances. Watching him navigate his relationship with his son is like watching two eras collide, his stoic, duty-bound masculinity clashing with a younger generation seeking emotional openness and connection. It's this unspoken historical tension between what fatherhood used to be and what it's becoming that adds a layer of cultural resonance to the film. The film understands that legacy isn't just in tools or tradition, it's in the way values are passed down, adapted, or challenged. What also makes The Forge feel rooted in a larger historical context is its thematic echo of redemption narratives across cinema history. It shares cinematic DNA with classics like The Straight Story, The Bicycle Thief, or even Rocky Balboa, films where broken men find healing through purpose, patience, and personal reckoning. But The Forge adds a spiritual texture that separates it from its secular counterparts. It's not just about earning redemption through effort, it's about receiving it through grace. That idea ties it to centuries of storytelling tradition, from biblical parables to modern allegories. And yet, despite all these nods to legacy, cinematic, spiritual, and vocational, The Forge never feels trapped by history. It uses the past not as a blueprint to replicate, but as a foundation to build upon. In doing so, it invites audiences to reflect on their own heritage, what's worth preserving, what needs reshaping, and what can only be reforged through honesty, humility, and time. Whether you grew up around a forge or never touched a hammer, the film pulls you into that world and makes its legacy feel personal. That's not just good storytelling, that's cultural memory brought to life. The budget-to-box office story of The Forge, 2024, reads like an underdog tale worthy of its own redemption arc made on a lean $5 million budget. The film went on to gross more than $40 million worldwide, about an 8-fold return on investment. That's not just good, it's virtually unheard of for a niche faith-based drama. On its opening weekend in the US and Canada, The Forge earned around $6.6 million from just 1,818 theaters, a notably small footprint compared to full-wide releases, and still ranked 5th overall at the box office. It even outperformed larger-budget films like The Crow in per-theater averages despite having fewer screens. Word of mouth and faith-based grassroots support fueled its strong legs. CinemaScore audiences gave it a rare A+ grade, selling out showings thanks to church group outings and community screenings. That enthusiastic reception extended beyond domestic theaters. About 25% of the film's total revenue came from international markets, with Brazil alone contributing nearly $7.8 million, far exceeding expectations from previous faith-based titles. Critics had mixed reviews, with Rotten Tomatoes hovering around 63 to 64%, but audiences overwhelmingly loved it. Audience ratings soared with thousands of glowing reviews. The production quality punches above its modest budget, delivering believable forge sequences, natural lighting, and textured set design that looks far more expensive than $5 million suggests. It leans into practical design, down-to-earth cinematography, and tight storytelling rather than expensive effects or star salaries. That discipline meant the film looked and felt richer than its budget alone would suggest. Marketing was targeted, not mainstream splash, but smart deployment through church networks, Southern Baptist circles, and Affirm Films channels. The Kendrick brothers' built-in following helped create opening weekend momentum without massive promotional spending. By the time it hit streaming, debuting in late December 2024, the film continued to thrive, reaching top 5 U.S. streaming within days and sustaining visibility well beyond its theatrical window. Discussions online, from box office communities to Christian film blogs, highlight that The Forge not only met financial expectations, it exceeded them. Analysts noted the film outperformed some wide releases of much higher-cost films, even in limited-release theaters. Theater employees reported repeat showings filled with church group audiences and consistent sales even weeks into its run. In short, The Forge achieved financial success that few independent dramas ever do. With a small budget, minimal mainstream marketing, and niche appeal, it delivered a production that felt rich, earned rave audience grades, and generated meaningful earnings through shrewd, audience-aligned distribution. Here's how you can best experience The Forge, 2024. In theaters, August 23, 2024. Present, it had a theatrical release through Sony Pictures Releasing, playing in over 1,800 U.S. theaters and drawing praise and packed crowds during its opening weekend. If it's still showing near you, catching it on the big screen delivers the strongest impact, immersing you in the tactile world of The Forge, amplified by the communal energy of the audience. Streaming on Netflix from December 21, 2024, it debuted on Netflix in the US in late December and quickly climbed into the platform's top 5. This makes it an easy pick for home viewing, complete with subtitle and audio options that enhance rewatchability and group viewing. Digital rental or purchase. From December 2024, available for rent or purchase on Amazon Video, Apple TV, YouTube, Microsoft Store, Google Play, Fandango at Home, and other platforms. Digital buys often include extras like behind-the-scenes clips, Bible study guides, and director Q/and as, perfect for fans who want to dig deeper. DVD and Blu-ray. Physical formats are likely available now and can include exclusive content, great for collectors or those hosting community or Bible study groups. Best way to watch. Theater. Go for maximum emotional impact. The rumble of The Forge, the crackle of dialogue, shared reactions amplify every beat. Netflix streaming. Ideal for reflection and rewatch. Watch alone or with friends, pause to absorb key moments, rewind dialogue, revisit visual metaphors. Digital purchase/Blu-ray. Perfect for those who want bonus features, behind-the-scenes footage, cast interviews, deeper exploration of themes and production. Viewing tips for full effect. Turn down ambient lights and reduce distractions. The film's emotional power thrives in quiet, focused attention. Watch with others who appreciate heartfelt storytelling. Discussions afterward about forgiveness, family, and identity can be powerful. Pair the film with post-viewing resources, devotional guides, or discussion questions provided by the Kendrick brothers deepen the impact. Whether you're in the theater soaking in the atmosphere, streaming it solo or as a family, or exploring extras after purchase, The Forge can be an emotionally rich viewing experience tailored to how deeply you want to engage.